Rancher gave his only horse to a wounded Apache woman. What she offered him was beyond imagination. The sun had just begun its slow climb over the dusty hills of Arizona, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The wind whispered through the dry grass, carrying with it the faint scent of sagebrush and earth, warmed by the early morning sun. On this vast and lonely stretch of land, John McAllister, a middle-aged rancher, guided his only horse along the narrow trail that wound through his property. The horse, a strong chestnut mare named Daisy, had been with him for years, carrying him across the rough terrain, helping him herd cattle, and even keeping him company during long, quiet nights on the ranch. Daisy was more than a horse to John. She was a companion, a friend, and, in many ways, a lifeline. John was a man shaped by the land he lived on. He was tall, weathered, and lean, with sunburned skin and hands roughened by years of work. Life on the ranch had taught him patience, resilience, and independence. He had no family left. His parents had passed when he was young, and he had never married. The ranch was his world, and Daisy was his closest companion. Yet despite his hard life, John had a quiet sense of empathy. He had seen enough hardship and suffering to understand the weight of loneliness and pain. That morning, as he guided Daisy along a narrow creek that cut through a grove of scrub oak and juniper, John noticed something unusual. A faint sound reached his ears, carried by the wind, a soft, weak groan, almost like a whisper. At first, he thought it might be an injured animal, but the groan was too human, too deliberate. His heart quickened. He slowed Daisy to a careful walk, scanning the ground and the shadows among the trees. Then he saw her. She was lying near the edge of the creek, partially hidden by tall grass and rocks. At first glance, she looked fragile, barely moving, her long dark hair matted with dirt and blood. John's first instinct was caution. He had grown up hearing stories of conflicts between settlers and the Apache people who roamed the area. Many of the stories were dark, filled with fear and mistrust. But as he looked closer, he realized that she was not a threat. She was injured and alone, struggling to breathe and move. John dismounted Daisy carefully, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. He approached her, calling softly, "Hey, you all right? Can you hear me?" She opened her eyes weakly, revealing deep, dark eyes that seemed both wary and tired. Her gaze flickered with pain, but also with something else, a quiet strength that refused to be broken even in her weakened state. She did not answer at first, just stared at him. John noticed that her clothes were torn, and there were fresh bruises on her arms and legs. He could see a wound on her side, partially covered by a piece of cloth from which blood had soaked through. Her breathing was shallow, and every movement caused her to wince. John's heart sank. He had seen many injuries before, but this felt different. He knew that if she did not receive care soon, she might not survive the day. He looked around quickly, realizing that he had no medical supplies beyond a few bandages and some water. His ranch was miles away, and the nearest town was even farther. Still, he did not hesitate. Survival, he knew, depended on immediate action. He knelt beside her, careful not to startle her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "I can help you, but you need to trust me a little." She flinched slightly, but did not resist. Her eyes met his again, and for a moment, John felt a strange connection, a silent understanding that words could not capture. Using a clean cloth from his saddlebag, John tried to stop the bleeding. He worked slowly, talking to her in a calm voice, explaining what he was doing, hoping to ease her fear. "Just hold on," he said. "We'll get through this. You're not alone now." She nodded faintly, too weak to speak. John realized then that she must have been traveling alone for a long time. Her injuries suggested a struggle, maybe an attack or an accident. Either way, she had fought hard to survive, and that resilience impressed him. After tending to the wound as best as he could, John helped her to sit up against a rock. He offered her water, which she took slowly, her hands trembling. Every sip seemed to restore a little of her strength, though her body still shivered from exhaustion and shock. John glanced at Daisy, who was standing patiently nearby, nostrils flaring, sensing the tension and urgency. He knew he needed a plan. Carrying her to the ranch would be dangerous. She was heavy and the terrain was rough, but it was the only option. John lifted her carefully, supporting her under the arms, and began the slow trek back. Daisy followed closely, stepping carefully over rocks and brush. The journey was arduous, the sun climbing higher, beating down on them with relentless heat. John's muscles ached, and his legs trembled under the weight, but he did not falter. Along the way, he kept talking to her, asking her name, where she came from, and if she had family. She remained quiet, only giving short nods or shaking her head. But John respected her silence. He did not press her. He knew that trust was fragile, especially in moments like this. What mattered most was her survival, and he focused all his energy on that. By late morning, they reached the ranch. John laid her gently on a clean bed in the small cabin he called home. The cabin was modest but warm, with a fireplace, a wooden table, and a few chairs. He brought water and food, though she could eat little. He cleaned her wounds further, applying salves and bandages, all the while keeping a watchful eye on her condition. Over the next hours, John observed her. She was quiet, yet every so often, she would look around the cabin with curiosity, taking in the simple life of the rancher who had saved her. There was a dignity in her movements, even in weakness, and a quiet intelligence that John could sense. He felt a mixture of admiration and respect. Here was someone who had survived hardship, who had fought against the odds, and yet had not given up. As evening fell, John lit the fireplace, casting a warm glow across the room. The Apache woman finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. She introduced herself as Aylin. John nodded in acknowledgement, offering a reassuring smile. He did not ask too many questions. He simply prepared a small meal and placed it beside her. She ate slowly, and he could see her gaining strength with each bite. That night, John sat by the fire, Daisy resting nearby, and reflected on the day. He had taken a risk, helping someone he did not know, someone from a different world than his own. But he felt no regret. Something about Aylin's presence, her courage and resilience, stirred something deep within him. It was as if fate had brought them together, two souls from different worlds finding a moment of connection in the vast, untamed land of Arizona. For Aylin, the rancher's kindness was unexpected. She had known mistrust and danger in her life, had learned to rely only on herself. Yet here was a man who offered help without question, without expectation, without judgment. She felt a strange mixture of gratitude, awe, and cautious hope. For the first time in many days, maybe even weeks, she allowed herself to believe that she could survive. Not just survive, but heal. Outside, the wind carried the soft sounds of the desert night, distant coyote cries, the rustling of leaves, and the faint murmur of the creek. Inside the cabin, a quiet understanding settled between them. Two lives brought together by chance and circumstance, now intertwined by an act of simple humanity. John did not know what the future would hold. He did not know if Aylin would stay or leave once she recovered, and he did not know what dangers might come. Yet for that night he felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. He had done the right thing. He had chosen compassion over fear, action over hesitation. And in that choice, he discovered something deeper, a reminder that even in a harsh and unforgiving world, kindness could still be a guiding light. As sleep overcame them both, the fire dwindled to glowing embers, casting long shadows across the cabin. Outside, the vast plains of Arizona stretched endlessly under the starry sky, indifferent yet beautiful. And in that quiet night, a rancher and a wounded Apache woman began a story that neither of them could have imagined, a story that would change both their lives forever. The morning sun spilled into the small cabin, casting a warm light across the wooden floor. John McAllister was already awake, tending to his morning chores. The ranch had to be cared for, no matter what surprises life threw at him. But his thoughts were not on the cattle or the fields. They were on Island, the Apache woman who had been found wounded near the creek. She was still asleep, her breathing steady and calm, a blanket pulled gently over her shoulders. For the first time since he had found her, John felt a strange mixture of hope and uncertainty. He prepared a simple breakfast, some fresh eggs and bread he had baked the day before. The smell filled the cabin, and eventually, Aylin stirred, blinking her dark eyes against the light. She looked stronger than the day before, though still fragile. Her lips curved into a small, almost shy smile when she saw John placing the food before her. "Thank you," she whispered in a voice soft yet clear. John nodded, returning the smile. "You're getting better," he said, trying to keep his tone light, though he was worried. "You need to eat and rest. Then we'll see about getting you stronger." She nodded, picking up the bread and nibbling slowly. John watched her carefully. Even in her weakened state, there was a quiet dignity in the way she moved, a careful awareness of her surroundings. He could sense that she had survived many hardships before, that her strength was not just physical, but rooted deep within her spirit. After breakfast, John went outside to check on Daisy. The chestnut mare neighed softly, happy to see him. John ran his hands along her mane, brushing away the dust from the morning ride. Daisy had been his companion for years, his closest friend after solitude itself. He knew he relied on her more than anything else. She carried him across the rough terrain, helped him herd the cattle, and even kept him company during the long, lonely nights. Losing Daisy would be more than an inconvenience. It would be a major blow to his ability to manage the ranch. And yet, as John stood there, brushing the mare's mane, a thought took root in his mind, one that both frightened and inspired him. Island was still weak and could not travel easily on her own. She needed a way to move across the land, to escape if necessary, and to survive until she regained her full strength. The thought of giving her Daisy, the only horse he had, made his chest tighten. It was a huge risk. Without Daisy, he would struggle to manage the ranch. But the alternative, leaving Aylin with no way to move safely, seemed cruel, almost impossible to accept. John spent the morning working on the fences and feeding the cattle, but his mind kept returning to the decision he had to make. He had spent much of his life alone, relying only on his own skills, his own judgment. Trusting someone else, especially someone he barely knew, was not easy. But he also knew the land could be unforgiving, and survival often depended on the kindness of others. Perhaps it was time to act, even if it meant taking a risk. When the sun was high, he returned to the cabin to find Island sitting up, wrapping a cloth around her leg where a small bruise was healing. She looked stronger, and there was a quiet determination in her eyes that made John pause. He realized then that she was not just a fragile woman. She was someone who had endured suffering and yet remained unbroken. Her presence commanded respect, even if she spoke little. John cleared his throat, feeling the weight of the decision he was about to make. "Island," he said gently, "I have something for you, something I want you to use to get around, until you are stronger." She looked at him with curiosity, her eyes wide but careful. He paused, measuring his words. "It's my horse, Daisy." For a moment, Island did not speak. She simply stared at him, as if trying to understand what he was offering. Her gaze shifted from John to Daisy, and back again. The chestnut mare nickered softly, sensing the tension in the room. John continued, "I know it's my only horse. I rely on her for everything. But I also know you need her more than I do right now. I can teach you how to ride safely. And when you're ready, you can keep going on your own." Aylin's eyes filled with surprise and gratitude. She reached out a hand to touch Daisy's mane, her fingers trembling slightly. "You would do this for me?" she asked softly. John nodded. "I would. You need a chance to get well. That's more important than anything else." There was a pause as the words sank in. Island's lips curved into a small smile, a mixture of relief and something deeper: hope. She had lived in a world where kindness was rare, where help was often offered only with strings attached, yet here was a man who had given her something invaluable without hesitation, something that could make the difference between life and death. She felt a deep gratitude, one that words could scarcely express. Over the next few hours, John taught her how to ride Daisy safely. At first, Island was nervous, her balance uncertain, her muscles stiff from weeks of injury and travel. But John was patient, guiding her hands on the reins, correcting her posture, and encouraging her with gentle words. Slowly, she gained confidence. She began to understand the rhythm of the horse, how to move with her rather than against her. By late afternoon, she could ride short distances around the ranch without difficulty. As they rode together, John noticed a change in Aylin. Her eyes shone with excitement, her body moving more freely, her laughter, quiet at first, breaking through the silence of the ranch. For John, the sight was both rewarding and humbling. He realized that the simple act of giving someone a horse could do more than help them move. It could restore dignity, independence, and hope. That evening they returned to the cabin, both tired but content. Aylin dismounted gracefully and stroked Daisy's neck, whispering a word of thanks that John did not understand but felt deeply. He smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that he had not experienced in years. Helping Aylin had not only saved her, it had opened a door in his own heart, a door he had kept closed for too long. As they sat by the fire that night, Aylin spoke more than she had before. She told John stories of her people, of the land she had traveled, and the hardships she had endured. She spoke with respect for the land, with wisdom beyond her years, and with a quiet humor that made John chuckle more than once. In turn, John shared stories of his life on the ranch, of the cattle, the storms, and the loneliness of a man who had spent most of his life with only the land and his horse for company. Through their stories, a bond grew between them, built on trust, respect, and shared understanding. They did not need to speak of the future or promises. It was enough that they had found each other in that moment, two strangers from different worlds, connected by kindness and necessity. John realized that the act of giving Daisy to Aylin had not left him empty-handed. Instead, it had brought something far greater, a sense of purpose, a companion in a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving. Over the next few days, John continued to teach Aylin not just riding but also basic ranch work. She learned how to help with the cattle, how to tend to the small garden he maintained, and even how to care for Daisy. Each task strengthened her body and spirit, and John watched with pride as she transformed from a wounded, weary traveler into a capable, confident woman. Her laughter became more frequent, her movements more assured, and the quiet strength in her eyes grew even more apparent. One afternoon, as they worked near the creek, Aylin paused and looked out over the land. "This place, it is different from mine," she said softly. "But it is good, safe." John nodded, understanding her meaning. She had known danger and hardship, yet here she felt something new: security, and perhaps even the possibility of a fresh start. John realized that he had not only saved her life, but had also offered something more valuable: the chance for hope. He had given her a horse, yes, but he had also given her trust, safety, and a glimpse of a future where she could heal and thrive. In turn, she had given him a gift too: the gift of connection, of shared humanity, and the reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could change lives in ways one could never imagine. As the sun set behind the distant hills, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, John and Aylin returned to the cabin. Daisy followed faithfully, her hooves stirring up dust that caught the light of the fading day. Inside, the fire was lit, casting warm shadows across the room. They sat together in silence for a moment, each reflecting on the events of the past days. John realized that giving Daisy to Aylin had been the right choice. It was a risk, yes, but one that had already yielded a reward far beyond what he had imagined. In helping her, he had discovered a new sense of purpose and a new companion, not just in her, but in the bond they had created, one built on trust, respect, and the quiet power of generosity. That night, as the stars twinkled overhead and the desert settled into its quiet rhythm, John and Alan drifted to sleep, both changed in ways they did not yet fully understand. The bond between them had been formed, one that would shape the days and months to come, a bond that began with a simple act of kindness and would grow into something far beyond imagination. The days passed slowly on John McAllister's ranch, but each day brought new growth, both in Aylin and in the bond between her and John. By now, Aylin had regained much of her strength. Her wounds had healed, leaving only faint marks that told a story of survival. She moved with confidence now, riding Daisy across the plains as if she had been born to the saddle. Each time she returned from a ride, she would smile at John, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and pride. For him, it was a joy to see her recover, not just physically, but in spirit as well. Despite the obvious differences between them, John and Aylin began to understand one another in ways that words could not fully capture. He noticed how she observed the land with sharp, intelligent eyes, noticing things he had overlooked even after years of ranching. She would point out hidden water sources, small patches of wild herbs, and subtle changes in the weather that could mean a storm was coming. John found himself learning from her, humbled by the knowledge she carried, knowledge that had been passed down through generations of her people. Aylin, too, observed John carefully. She had grown accustomed to his routines, his quiet way of moving through the world, and his steadfast care for the land. She admired the patience he displayed when tending to the cattle, the gentle way he spoke to Daisy, and the thoughtfulness he showed in every small decision. Though she had lived a life where danger and mistrust were constant companions, here she felt something new: the quiet stability of someone who genuinely cared. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, John and Aylin set out to inspect the northern pasture. The grass there had grown thick, and a few of the cattle had wandered close to the creek, where the ground was softer and the water fresh. Aylin rode ahead, guiding Daisy carefully, while John followed at a slower pace. They moved in silence for a time, comfortable in the presence of one another. Finally, Aelin spoke, her voice low but steady. Your land, it is strong. It gives life even in harsh times. John looked at her, surprised by the insight. It is rough, he admitted, but it has its own way of giving back to those who care for it. She nodded thoughtfully. I have seen lands like this in my travels, but few as generous as this. You take care of it, and it takes care of you in return. Her words struck John in a way he did not expect. He had always known the land was harsh and unforgiving, but he had never thought of it as generous. Island's perspective opened his eyes to a new way of seeing the world, a way that combined respect, patience, and understanding. He realized that there was much he could learn from her, just as there was much she could learn from him. Over the following days, they worked side by side. John showed Aelin how to mend fences, check the health of the cattle, and manage the small orchard he had planted near the cabin. In return, Aelin shared her knowledge of the land, which plants could be used for healing, how to track the signs of changing weather, and even how to predict the movement of animals. John was amazed at her skill, at the depth of understanding she possessed, and he found himself relying on her insights more than he had expected. Their companionship began to feel natural, like a rhythm that had existed long before they had met. They laughed together, shared stories around the fire, and sometimes sat in silence, simply enjoying the comfort of being in each other's presence. John realized that he had never experienced such trust before. He had lived a life of solitude, guarding his heart and his land with equal care. Yet with Aelin, he felt no need to guard himself. There was a simplicity and honesty in her presence that made him feel safe, even as it challenged him in ways he had never anticipated. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Aelin asked John a question that had been on her mind for some time. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice quiet but insistent. John looked at her, thinking carefully. He could have given many answers: duty, compassion, or perhaps even curiosity, but none seemed to fully capture the truth. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I guess I didn't see you as someone to leave behind. I saw someone in need. That's all." Aelin studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then she smiled faintly. "That is rare," she said simply. "Not many help without expecting something in return." John nodded, understanding the depth of what she meant. In her world, survival often depended on cunning and caution. Trust was a gift, not freely given. And yet here they were, learning to trust each other slowly, step by step. As the days turned into weeks, Aelin began to share more of her life with John. She spoke of her family, the people of her village, and the lessons she had learned from her elders. She spoke of resilience, of patience, and of the balance between giving and taking in life. John listened intently, sometimes surprised by her insights, sometimes humbled by the wisdom she carried. It became clear to him that Aelin's gift was not just her physical presence, but the knowledge and perspective she offered, a gift that was shaping him in ways he had not expected. One afternoon, while tending to the orchard together, Aelin suddenly paused. She crouched down, examining the soil and the roots of a young apple tree. "The earth here is rich," she said thoughtfully, "but it can give more if you listen to it." John watched her carefully. "Listen?" he asked. She nodded. "The land speaks if you pay attention. It tells you when it needs care, when it is ready to give, when it is hiding danger. I can teach you if you want." John felt a spark of excitement. He had spent his life working the land, relying on experience and instinct. Yet here was a new way of understanding it, a deeper connection that promised greater reward. He nodded eagerly. "I want to learn," he said. And so, day by day, Island taught him to observe, to interpret, and to respect the land in ways he had never considered. Together, they began to see subtle signs, changes in the wind that predicted rain, the way plants bent in response to moisture, and the hidden patterns of wildlife. The more they worked together, the more John realized how much Ailyn had changed his life already. Her presence had brought not only companionship, but a new perspective, a reminder that life was not just about survival, but about understanding, respect, and connection. In turn, Ailyn seemed to find comfort in the stability John provided, the routine of the ranch, and the simple kindness he had shown her. One evening, as the stars appeared in the clear desert sky, Ailyn spoke softly. "I have seen hardship in my life," she said. "I have traveled through lands where trust was rare and danger was constant. But here, I feel safe. I feel that life can be good, even after suffering." John looked at her, moved by her words. He realized that she was speaking not just of physical safety, but of a deeper sense of belonging, a feeling he himself had discovered in the days they had spent together. Their bond continued to grow, and soon it was evident that their connection went beyond mere necessity. John admired her courage, her wisdom, and her gentle strength. Ailyn admired his patience, his integrity, and the quiet way he cared for the world around him. They had learned to communicate without words at times, understanding gestures, glances, and the subtle language of shared experience. Then one morning, as they walked along the creek together, Ailyn stopped abruptly. She knelt by the water, tracing her fingers over the smooth stones, her expression thoughtful. "This land," she said, "it is more than it seems. It holds secrets, hidden paths, and treasures if you know how to see." John frowned slightly, intrigued and cautious. "Treasures?" he asked. She nodded. "Not gold or silver, but something that can change life if you know how to use it." John felt a shiver of curiosity. He had learned much from Ailyn already, but her words hinted at something deeper, something beyond what he had imagined. He realized that the next part of their journey would not just be about survival or companionship. It would be about discovery, understanding, and perhaps even transformation. As the sun set that day, casting long shadows across the ranch, John and Ailyn returned to the cabin. They were both silent for a time, each lost in thought. John realized that giving her Daisy had been just the beginning. That simple act of kindness had opened a door to a connection that neither of them could have predicted, a door that now led to shared understanding, mutual respect, and a promise of something extraordinary. In the quiet of the cabin, as the fire crackled and the night settled over the plains, John felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had gained more than he could have imagined by helping a wounded traveler. He had gained friendship, insight, and a renewed sense of purpose. And as Ailyn rested quietly beside him, her presence a steady and comforting force, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, learning from one another and discovering the hidden treasures the world had to offer. The days grew warmer, and the desert sun beat down on the ranch, yet John McAllister and Ailyn found themselves thriving in a rhythm that balanced work, learning, and quiet companionship. Ailyn had grown stronger with each passing day, and her confidence with Daisy had turned into skill. She could ride the chestnut mare across rough terrain with ease, guiding cattle, navigating rocky paths, and even predicting weather changes that John himself sometimes missed. Her presence had become indispensable to the ranch, though John still marveled at her insights and abilities. One afternoon, as John repaired a fence near the northern pasture, Ailyn came riding slowly from the hills, Daisy moving gracefully over the uneven ground. She carried a small satchel which she set gently on the table as she entered the cabin. Her expression was serious, a quiet intensity in her eyes that made John pause. "I have something to show you," Island said softly, her voice carrying a weight that made John curious. Island sad. She opened the satchel and began to remove objects carefully wrapped in cloth. John leaned forward, intrigued, as she revealed a collection of hand-carved wooden tools, small pouches of dried herbs, and a carefully folded piece of parchment that glimmered faintly in the sunlight streaming through the window. "These," she said, holding up the parchment, "are maps of the land and its hidden paths. They were passed down to me by my elders. They show where water runs underground, where rare herbs grow, and where the land can offer resources that are hidden to most people." John's eyes widened. Maps like these could change everything. The ranch was already fertile, but with this knowledge he could cultivate land more effectively, protect his cattle better, and even find hidden sources of water that could sustain him through dry seasons. Aylin continued, "These tools and herbs can help you care for the land and the animals in ways that are not obvious. Some of these plants heal wounds quickly, some repel pests, and others enrich the soil. My people have used them for generations. I want you to have them, not because I owe you, but because I see that you care for the land, just as we do." John felt a rush of emotions, astonishment, gratitude, and humility. He had helped Aylin when she was vulnerable, but he had never imagined that she could offer him something so extraordinary in return. He realized that the true gift was not just the maps or the herbs, but the knowledge and trust she was sharing with him. It was a bridge between two worlds, a bond built on respect and generosity. Over the next days, Island taught John how to read the maps and understand the subtle signs of the land. She showed him how to identify medicinal herbs, how to find hidden water sources, and even how to prepare natural remedies for minor injuries or illness. John absorbed every lesson eagerly, amazed by the depth of her knowledge. He realized that this wisdom, passed down through generations, could transform his life on the ranch, making his work more efficient and sustainable. One morning, they set out to explore one of the hidden paths Aylin had marked on the map. The path led through a narrow canyon over rocky hills and finally to a small spring that John had never noticed before. The water was crystal clear, cool, and abundant, a hidden treasure that would provide life-giving water for his cattle even in the driest months. John knelt beside the spring, cupping the water in his hands and drinking deeply. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the water, but for the gift of knowledge and trust that Aylin had shared with him. Aylin smiled quietly as she watched him. "The land rewards those who listen," she said softly. "It will provide if you care for it, but only if you understand its ways." John nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He had spent his life working the land, relying on strength and experience, but he now understood that knowledge, respect, and observation were just as important. As the weeks passed, John implemented what Island had taught him. The orchard flourished with new herbs and plants. The cattle thrived with better water sources, and even Daisy seemed more energetic, as if the land itself was responding to the care and understanding now applied to it. John's neighbors noticed the improvements and asked how he had managed such change in so little time. He smiled quietly, knowing that the real credit belonged to Aylin. Despite the practical benefits, there was something even more remarkable about Aylin's gift. She had given him more than tools and knowledge. She had given him perspective. He began to see the world differently, appreciating not just the results of his work, but the intricate balance of nature, the subtle connections between plants, animals, and humans, and the importance of patience and observation. Every task on the ranch became an opportunity to learn, to understand, and to connect more deeply with the land he loved. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, John and Aylin sat together on a low wooden fence, looking out over the ranch. Daisy grazed nearby, her ears flicking toward the sounds of the desert. John turned to Aylin, his heart full of gratitude. "You have changed everything," he said quietly. "I don't think I can ever thank you enough." Aylin shook her head gently. "You helped me when I needed it most." That was enough. What I offer now is simply a way to honor that kindness. John realized that Aylin's gift was more than practical. It was transformative. By sharing her knowledge and insight, she had not only improved his life, but had also opened his mind to new ways of thinking, to new ways of seeing the world. He felt a deep sense of humility, recognizing that true generosity was not measured in material wealth, but in trust, wisdom, and understanding. Over time, their bond deepened even further. They continued to work together, exploring hidden paths, discovering new herbs, and caring for the land with a level of knowledge and respect that neither had experienced before. Their partnership became a symbol of what could be achieved when people from different backgrounds came together with trust, compassion, and a shared purpose. One day, as they walked along the creek, Aylin paused and looked at John with a thoughtful expression. "There is more the land can teach us," she said, "but only if we remain patient and open. True understanding comes slowly, with time and care." John nodded, realizing that this was a lesson not just about the land, but about life itself. Patience, observation, and respect. These were qualities that would guide him not only on the ranch, but in every aspect of life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, John felt a sense of peace he had not known before. Aylin's gift had been unexpected, yet it had brought him more than he could have imagined: knowledge, insight, and a profound understanding of the world around him. And in return, he had offered her kindness, safety, and trust, a reminder that the simplest acts of compassion could ripple outward, creating consequences far greater than anyone could foresee. That night, as the stars shimmered in the clear desert sky and the wind whispered softly through the grass, John reflected on the journey that had brought them together. From the day he found Aylin wounded and alone, their lives had intertwined in ways neither could have predicted. What began as an act of mercy had blossomed into a relationship built on trust, respect, and mutual growth. Aylin lay quietly on a blanket near the fire, Daisy resting close by, and John felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected turn of events. The ranch had become more than just land and cattle. It had become a place of learning, connection, and transformation. And he knew that the gift Aylin had offered him, her knowledge, her trust, and her insight, would shape not only his life, but the life of the ranch for years to come. In the stillness of the night, John understood something profound. True generosity was not about what one could give materially, but about the willingness to share knowledge, trust, and understanding. Aylin had given him all of these things, and in doing so had changed his life forever. And though he could not predict what the future would hold, he knew that together they could face it with courage, wisdom, and a shared respect for the land and each other. The days on the ranch settled into a peaceful rhythm. The sun rose and set over the vast Arizona plains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and the gentle wind carried the scent of sagebrush across the land. John McAllister moved about his property with a newfound confidence, guided by the knowledge Aylin had shared and the quiet wisdom he had gained from their time together. Daisy, the chestnut mare, grazed near the fence, her strong legs carrying her gracefully across the fields as if she, too, had sensed the harmony that now existed on the ranch. Aylin had grown even stronger and more confident, her dark eyes shining with vitality. She moved with purpose and grace, whether riding Daisy, tending the garden, or guiding John through the hidden paths of the land. Her knowledge of the terrain, the plants, and the natural balance of the environment had become invaluable. John often marveled at how much he had learned from her, lessons about patience, observation, and respect that could not be taught in books. One morning, as the sun broke over the horizon, Aylin approached John with a thoughtful expression. "The land has changed," she said softly, "not because it has become easier, but because we understand it better. We listen, we care, and we act wisely. That is what it gives back." John nodded, realizing the truth in her words. The ranch was thriving not because of luck, but because of knowledge, respect, and shared effort. The work they had done together had created something stronger, more resilient, and more beautiful than either of them could have achieved alone. Over the weeks, the ranch continued to flourish. The orchard was full of fruit. The garden produced herbs and vegetables that John had never grown before, and the cattle were healthier and more plentiful than ever. The hidden spring Aylin had shown him provided fresh water for the animals even in the hottest weeks of summer. John's neighbors often stopped by, curious about the changes they noticed. They marveled at the growth of the land and the success of the ranch, unaware that the real treasure behind it all was not in the soil or the water, but in the lessons Aylin had shared and the partnership they had built. Despite the improvements, John felt that something more profound had been achieved. It was not the success of the ranch that filled his heart, but the bond he had formed with Aylin. They had begun as strangers from different worlds, brought together by chance and a single act of kindness. Now, their connection had grown into something deep, meaningful, and unshakable. It was built on trust, respect, and shared experiences, and it carried a quiet strength that neither of them could have anticipated. One evening, as the sky turned to shades of deep blue and silver stars began to appear, John and Aylin sat by the fire outside the cabin. The wind carried the soft murmur of the creek, and the desert was alive with the subtle sounds of night. They spoke little, content to enjoy the calm together. Eventually, Aylin broke the silence. "You have taken care of the land well," she said, her voice steady. "And in doing so, you have taken care of yourself too." John looked at her, curious. "Taking care of myself?" he asked. Aylin nodded. "Yes. You have learned to listen, to observe, and to respect what is around you. God, that is more than tending cattle or fixing fences. That is understanding life in all its ways." John smiled, realizing the truth in her words. He had spent years focused on survival and work, often overlooking the deeper connections and lessons the land had to offer. Through Aylin, he had discovered a new way of living, one that combined hard work with wisdom, compassion, and understanding. In the days that followed, Aylin continued to share more of her knowledge, teaching John to anticipate changes in the weather, identify rare plants, and even recognize patterns in the behavior of wildlife. Each lesson deepened his understanding, making him a better rancher, a more careful observer, and a wiser man. And in return, John offered Aylin something equally valuable: stability, safety, and the freedom to heal fully. Together, they had created a space where growth, learning, and trust could thrive. Then came the day when Aylin told John that she would be leaving. She had been offered the opportunity to return to her people and share what she had learned with others in her community. It was a decision that carried both excitement and sadness. John felt a lump in his throat at the thought of her departure, though he understood that her journey was not finished. She had gifts to share beyond the ranch, just as he had gifts to continue nurturing the land and life they had cultivated together. Aylin looked at John, her dark eyes calm but serious. "You have given me more than a horse," she said softly. You have given me safety, trust, and a chance to heal. In return, I hope I have given you something that lasts forever." She handed him a small pouch tied carefully with a strip of cloth. Inside were seeds of rare plants, more maps of hidden water sources, and a few carefully wrapped herbs. Plant these, use them wisely. Let them remind you that every act of kindness, every choice to help someone, can grow into something much larger than we imagine. John felt a deep wave of gratitude and emotion. He realized that Island's gift was not only practical, but symbolic. It represented hope, wisdom, and the idea that generosity could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that could not be predicted. He nodded quietly, understanding the weight of her words. "Thank you," he said simply. "I will honor this gift, and I will remember everything you have taught me." The day of her departure arrived. Aylin saddled Daisy one last time and adjusted her pack with care. John helped her with her gear, feeling a mixture of pride and sadness. "Take care," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions welling inside. "And remember, you will always have a home here." Aylin smiled, a mixture of gratitude and fondness in her expression. "And you will always have a friend," she replied. As she rode away across the plains, disappearing into the horizon, John watched silently. Daisy trotted beside her with ease, carrying her safely across the rough terrain. John felt the land around him, strong and alive, as if acknowledging the journey they had shared. He knew that Aylin's lessons, her gifts, and the bond they had formed would remain with him forever, guiding his decisions, shaping his understanding, and reminding him of the power of kindness and trust. In the weeks that followed, John continued to tend the ranch with renewed purpose. The seeds Aylin had given him took root, growing into strong plants that enriched the soil, attracted wildlife, and offered new resources for the land. The maps guided him to hidden springs, and the knowledge of herbs and plants allowed him to care for Daisy and the cattle in ways he had never imagined. Every day he felt Aylin's influence in the land, in the animals, and in the quiet rhythm of life on the ranch. John also reflected on how much he had changed as a person. He had learned to trust, to share, and to see the world through the eyes of someone who understood its deeper rhythms. The gift of Aylin's wisdom and generosity had transformed not only the ranch but himself. He felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known, a quiet joy rooted in the knowledge that one act of kindness had created something far greater than he could have imagined. Years passed, and the ranch continued to prosper. Travelers and neighbors often commented on the beauty of the land, the health of the animals, and the abundance of crops and fruit. John would smile quietly, knowing that the true reason behind the success was the knowledge and trust Aylin had shared and the partnership they had formed. Though she had gone, her presence lingered in every corner of the ranch, in the hidden springs, the flourishing plants, and in John's heart. John often thought of her when he walked the land, guiding Daisy through the fields, observing the cattle, or tending the orchard. He remembered her words about listening to the land, caring for it, and respecting its ways. He realized that her greatest gift was not a material one, but the ability to see the world differently, to understand the importance of patience, trust, and connection. And so, the story of the rancher and the wounded Apache woman became more than just a tale of survival. It was a story of compassion, courage, and the extraordinary power of simple acts of kindness. One man had given his horse to a stranger, and in return he had received knowledge, trust, and a perspective that changed his life forever. Through this exchange, both lives had been transformed, leaving a legacy of hope, understanding, and the quiet magic that comes when people open their hearts to one another. Even as the seasons changed and the years passed, John never forgot Island. He shared the lessons she had taught him with those who came to the ranch, passing on knowledge about the land, its hidden treasures, and the importance of compassion and trust. He understood that kindness, like the seeds she had given him, could grow far beyond the original act, touching lives in ways that were impossible to foresee. At the end of each day, as the sun sank below the hills and the sky turned to deep shades of purple and gold, John would look across the plains, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. He had been given more than a gift. He had been given a reminder that even in a harsh, unpredictable world, trust, understanding, and generosity could create wonders. And in that quiet reflection, he felt connected, not just to Island, but to the land, the animals, and the unseen forces that bound all life together. John McAllister's life had been forever changed by a single act of kindness, a moment when he chose compassion over caution. And though Aylin had ridden away, her presence remained in the lessons she had shared, the gifts she had offered, and the deep, enduring connection they had formed. Together, even apart, they had created something that would last long beyond their time, a legacy of trust, wisdom, and the extraordinary power of human kindness.